Hello, everyone. It is my absolute delight to introduce Abby Palmer, who is going to present Abby Palmer Invents the Weather / Intrusion, a manifesto. So Abby Palmer has developed a practice which includes the wonderful Abby Palmer Invents the Weather, and the films are both online and showing, if you want to see them in their entirety. She is an artist and writer. She uses sculpture, text, film, and sensory intervention to explore sick bodies, viscous textures, and ecological landscapes. Artworks include mixed media solo exhibition Slime Mother, film series Abby Palmer Invents the Weather, and interactive gambling arcade Crip Casino. She is the author of Slugs, a Manifesto, and Sanatorium. Group shows include the Freeze Corridor Commission 2023, where her I just need to say the following. Where her copulating slug sculptures were suspended from the ceiling. So I just have to say that. Her writings appeared in so many places. She's been at Crip Arte Spazio at Venice Biennale, tons of awards. Welcome, Abby. A round of applause.
Hello. So I'm Abby Palmer. I'm a pale-skinned, freckly woman with chubby little cheeks. I've got warmish, mid-length brown hair with a fringe and gold-rimmed round glasses. That's what I look like. I just wanted to start by expressing tremendous gratitude to Sria, Oka, and Kenny and the Paul Mellon Center for facilitating this incredible space. I couldn't make it in person yesterday, but I was watching online. And I have just been so excited and such a fangirl for all of these people that I've read and seen and admired being together in one space. I think Crip community really need more time to come together, so this really feels like such a gift, and thank you for that. This talk is part of an ongoing conversation I've been having about ways of practicing as a disabled artist. Actually, from the first time I worked with Oka in 2017, which I'll talk about soon. Like all things Crip and disabled, the manifesto is very much a work in progress. It's going to fluctuate and change in its own sweet time. But I think it's a model that disabled practitioners could and should be playing with, and I'm also sharing it because I'm kind of hoping that you'll help me work on it a little bit and challenge it and ask me a lot of questions. So let's try and stretch it and push it further and pull it apart in a space filled with so much disabled wisdom. So far, I'm the test subject for Intrusion as Manifesto, so I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to what my practice is. This is my current artist statement. That's a picture of it, which is a lot of, for anyone who can't see it, lots of paper with some pastels, and I've just written a lot of things everywhere. Most prominently, the words "a sticky mess" I can see. Yeah, Intrusion as Manifesto. I make work that will hold you. The image I'm sharing is a hand holding a little slug. I use film, sculpture, text, and installation. My films are sensory and tactile. I want you to feel rooted in the body, aware of your breath, your tendons. When I touch a leaf, I want you to be touched. I build worlds within tiny confines, a box, a bed, a garden. My writing is fragmented, jumping between high and low register, bitchy little anecdotes and manifesto. I often address the female mystics, Saint Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, Marjorie Kemp, and her constant crying. Relatable. I think through my hands, but my hands hurt often. I am a scruncher, a builder-upper. I take household items, tinfoil, tape, and wire, and squeeze shapes that make you feel something. I combine cartoonish DIY elements with ambitious grandiosity. In Slime Mother, I recreated Rodin's The Kiss with 2 8-foot-long Jesmonite slugs wrapped around a massive disco ball. 3 floating, sluggy comrades rotated eerily, a slug orgy. Elvis crooned in the background. It was absurd and awe-inspiring all at once. I scattered beanbags underneath the slugs to create a site of transformative healing and rest. So I'm showing you a picture of what that looks like. Leopard slugs breed hanging from the sky through mucus threads, and they switch sex according to will. It's really exciting. So in the image that is on screen at the moment, there's 3 individual Jesmonite slugs, and then at the back, 2 intertwined slugs with a disco ball underneath them, and the disco ball is creating kind of this glittering effect everywhere. And then there's a close-up of those orgiastic slugs. And then another image of somebody lying underneath one of the floating slugs. I believe sensory intervention can be used to manifest other worlds and ways of being. I am moved by wetness, viscosity, one drip falling in slow motion, a jelly that jiggles when it's slapped. In sanatorium, I ask, how can my aching body become more like water? In Slugs, a manifesto, I ask, how can I become less horrified by a creature that oozes slime? I'm obsessed with politics of space. I prefer to relinquish control in my artwork. I built a clay slip fountain that the public could dip their hands into, then rub tentacle fingers all over the gallery walls. Above read the words, have no shame for the marks of your wetness. I enjoyed the gallery's concerned emails about cleaning off obscenities and mopping drips from the wall. I insisted on doing neither. So this is an image of day 1 of the thing I've just described. It's a canvas on a pink canvas on a pink wall that says, have no shame for the marks of your wetness. And it's covered in clay a little bit. There's a few drips below it. There were already emails happening about the drips below it. This is the last day of the exhibition. It's the same canvas, the same pink wall, but it's absolutely covered, and it continues to expand. It actually covered 6 walls by the end of the exhibition, and also several of the artworks in the show. Luckily, they're all mine, so it was fine. Okay, so that's who I am. Now I'm going to explain how I got there, if that makes sense. I hope that's a good way to do this. Let's see if it works. Intrusion as Manifesto. In 2015, I was forced to leave an elite university where I'd been studying English. Although I'd gotten a first-class grade for my dissertation, I could not sit my exams. I was experiencing an agony in my hands that was getting to the point where I couldn't hold my own food. I was assigned a transcriber by the university, but she had scoliosis and said that she could not cope with typing for the length of a 4-hour examination either. My own pain left me with brain fog, and I found it hard to organize my thoughts in a way that a transcriber would manage. Since a child, I've been a prolific writer. Nobody in my life had any doubt as to what my career would be, and now my arthritic fingers had reached a point where I could not even hold a pen. Out of necessity, I began to wonder about ways to push outwards. How can I expand a written metaphor into physical sensation? How does a poem about water change when you insert the scent of smoke or soil rubbed into your palm? How does the poem change when you listen to it while your hands are very wet? And if I use the same text but vary it by choice of sensation, do I end up with multiple poems? Can I get 4 poems for the price of 1? So in the slide here, there's a few images from a project called Alchemy that I did in 2015, where I tried to get 4 poems for the price of 1. One of my big questions was how much would people pay for a box of dirt if you made it conceptual enough? So you got 4 poems themed around elements: earth, air, water, and fire, and then 4 elemental things. So a box of dirt, a box of matches, a box of a little ink capsule, and then some menthol sweets that made breathing feel very interactive. And you could kind of pick a mix with that, and it changed the poem. And I want to mention here that I first wrote about this back in 2017 in a book called Nobody to Write With, Deaf and Disabled Poets Write Back, of which Oka was one of 3 incredible editors. My first version of Intrusion was a poetic model. It used poetry from the book to kind of argue for this idea that I was seeing from disabled writers, what language that kind of sprawled and moved and danced across the page. It didn't want to just sit in one place, and it invited all of this multi-sensory interaction, and it came in all these multiple forms. So I'm really grateful still for that space that kind of transformed my practice such a lot, but also I think was a really meaningful space, and I still think about all the time in my work. Here is, now we're in, what, 2026? 9 years later? Is that how many years it's been? A still updated, still unfinished version of this sprawling, unfinished proposal. At the moment, Intrusion as Manifesto argues that as a disabled practitioner with a fluctuating body, I must first identify and acknowledge the intrusions that interrupt my daily practice. Instead of skimming over them, I can use them as a jumping off point for innovation. Oh, I've missed one. Oops, there's some pictures. You'll just have to listen to me, sorry. Instead of skimming over the intrusions, I can use them as a jumping off point for innovation, the core of my practice rather than something to pretend away. What if the bits that are functionally harder for me are the points of interest? The thing that excites me in art is the crack where light shines through. In my case, this means my work will be fragmented, multisensory, and shape-shifting. I might make you do some of it for me. It doesn't have to be about my disability, but I should not try to gloss over the experience of my own body. And since my experience is there, I should use it. And I should also seek to understand the power that institutions and public space wield over my body, their intrusions, and try to disrupt them. So what does that mean in practice? An example of my intrusion that I experience in my daily life is this. I'm a mobility scooter user, and I'm also someone who thinks a lot. And as I've already said, I write a lot. I traveled a lot on foot when I was younger, and in that time, I used to use the rhythm of my footsteps as my meter. I wrote very metered and rhyming poetry, the sole of my foot connecting to the language that formed in my brain. And walking from point A to point B was very often a space for solving problems and developing. The act of moving through space becomes an opportunity to experience creative reverie, for ideas to circulate and build in my mind. If I'm writing a novel or planning a film, I might start my journey not sure where the idea is going, but by the time I get to the point in physical space, I've also kind of got there creatively, you know, like you're traveling in a way that helps you expand. So maybe I've already completed my plot point. But let's return to my scooter or my mobility aid. It is not the same. If I'm moving from point A to point B in my scooter and I'm thinking about my idea, my novel, my exhibition, my film, and I'm solving my problem, I'm thinking and I'm solving, and already it's a different meter. My ideas aren't very rhythmic because I drive really, really fast. It's part of the problem is like people's feet get in the way. You're like thinking a lot about that. So I'm a little untethered, but I'm still, you know, I'm thinking my idea through and I'm getting somewhere. And then suddenly I get to a problem. There's a curb in the road and there's no curb cut. And at that moment, I'm pulled from my creative reverie. I'm reminded that I'm a body and that I'm skin. And worse, I'm a marginalized body, a marginalized skin. The road wasn't built for people like me, so I'm hurt and I'm angry. And instead of solving my creative problem, I'm forced to like fall back into my body and focus on the journey. Do I go around? Do I turn backwards? Do I stop? Do I ask for help? Do I bump myself down and risk damaging my mobility aid? And in this moment, my creative reverie is interrupted by the logistics of my disabled body and my disabled experience, and by the anger at the unfairness of it all. So this is a really good example of one intrusion that I face on a daily basis. If I choose to use this as my jumping off point for how I make work, it follows that my ideas will be fragmented and interrupted as I pick them up and put them down. They might suddenly shift in tone or be about something else. I'll turn around and move in a different direction, go off on another tangent. They might be about more than one thing happening at the same time, because my body's always thinking about multiple logistics at once. If I'm always in different kinds of pain and have to use different parts of my body, so I'll be multisensory in how I practice, and I'm going to jump and shapeshift in form. The aesthetic might fluctuate. We might mix high and low art. We might write in fragments. I might tell you a bitchy little anecdote or go off on a tangent, and then you'll get a gap on the next page where my hands are very tired. The next page might have a different image and a different story, and then over pages and pages and pages, we build up to tell a version of Crip life that is more true to what my life feels and looks like. And that feels really, really different to me to what we're taught in most higher education, in art school and in writing school. You get told the same thing over and over again. To be a master of your practice, you have to do the same thing every day. You must write every day. You must draw every day. It's like this capitalist, industrialist version of creativity, which just doesn't allow for fluctuation or pain. But with Intrusion, my body is always telling a story sideways and taking you on a journey that stops and starts and turns you around where you don't expect it. How are we doing for time? I have no idea. Yeah, okay. So another example of Intrusion that inspires me from another artist's body is the artist and disability theorist Johanna Hedva. Their now very popular essay, Sick Woman Theory, was initially delivered as a lecture, kind of like this, and it was titled, "My Body is a Prison of Pain, and I want to leave it like a mystic, but I also want it to matter politically." At the beginning of the talk, they asked everyone who doesn't live with an ongoing disability or chronic illness to place a rock in their shoe and wear it throughout the duration of the talk. And that talk's over an hour long. That's a relatively distracting and intrusive thing to have happening, going on around your feet while you're listening. And for a lot of abled people, that's new. As a side note, how many of you have been distracted by the experience of your body while we've been talking? Shall we have a little wiggle quickly? Feel free to keep wiggling, I don't mind. So yeah, Hedva is using this idea of intrusion, maybe not naming it, but using it to hold a multisensory experience and change the relationship with language through physical experience. And I think that's a really great manifestation of what intrusion can do. It's of the disabled body, and it's enriching, it's multisensory, and it's innovative, and it's pushing metaphor into physical space. So to be clear, I'm showing here a lot of incidental images of my mobility scooter in inappropriate situations where I just kind of use it as a horse. This is an image of my RIP, my Pride Cult 2.0 Deluxe, which I used to carry a HEPA filter to my own book launch to make it slightly safer for people who were at risk of COVID. I still caught COVID at that book launch, just to say. But yeah, this is, if you look really closely, there's an image of my scooter next to, I think it's a Phillida Barlow sculpture, and it's in the Hayward Gallery, and my scooter has left its own little artwork on the wall where I drove into the wall, and so this is my scooter at New Contemporaries carrying all my pillows, and this is at the end of a casino where my scooter went home and led glitter everywhere. I made a film of Intrusion as a manifesto. Is this going to play? Will we make it play? It was just commissioned. It was released this week. I think Natalie Bubis is here, who curated the film. It was commissioned by Disability Arts Online for a new online exhibition called Displace. The exhibition's called "I Need to Be More Than a Lesson You Learned," and it's me just talking in fragments and collage about intrusion, and has this cute little animation which I'm going to play again, which for anyone who isn't able to, will it let me play it again? I don't know how to use a PowerPoint. There we go. It's a plasticine mobility scooter made out of matchbox and plasticine that does a really bad job of trying to climb up a curb and then falls apart. So to be clear, intrusions can come in many forms. They can be functional. How can I meet my task today when I can't leave my bed? They can be administrative. How can I start my big idea when I've got to chase up hospital referrals or sit in a waiting room or fill 1,000 welfare or grant forms, which I'm forced to paint a picture of the worst version of myself for and have to beg to get my needs met. And in late stage capitalism, where we're all being intruded on and interrupted more and more in complex and intersecting ways, people are being disabled by intrusions. If you're living in relative poverty, or you're moved every year from your home or your studio by some asshole landlord, or you're capturing one life-limiting virus after another year after year, you're gonna be further intruded on. And as we move further, intersecting marginalizations are also going to experience their own unique and painful forms of intrusion. So experience of racism or war or transness or fatness or raising a child without enough support are all going to have moments that pull you out of creative reverie in ways that are often difficult to overcome. My argument is we can't overcome them sometimes. We just can't. So like, instead of trying to pretend away, if we pretend away those intrusions, we're only ever going to have a slightly comparative, it will be compared to able-bodied white men in a way that makes our work look worse and less successful. And I don't think we should be trying to meet that standard. That's the wrong approach. So we're at about 30 minutes. I'm just going to very very quickly talk about part 2 of this theory that I'm still kind of working on. It's the opposite of intrusion, and it's about making space for reverie. And that's where the film Abby Palmer Invents the Weather comes in, which we'll play a little excerpt if we've got time, but it's also it's available online. There's going to be a link in the chat, and it's also always online. If you Google it, it's on YouTube. It's 4 films, and they're never not there. That's a stipulation. So anyway, making space for reverie. A problem I've been mulling over for a while in Intrusion as Manifesto is about the opposite experience, the kind of interruptions or frictions that come into your practice that are expansive and are generative and that you want more of, like the surprises. The world is full of these, but it can be hard to reach them as a crip body. I love to be outside in what we call the natural world, as separate to human urban environments. I love parks and forests and woodlands, even though it's hostile to me sometimes. If my scooter trips over a tree root, it does often feel less oppressive in a forest than if the tree was planted in a slab of concrete in a road I'm trying to lead down. When I trip over the tree in the forest and can't go further, instead of feeling oppressed by my landscape, I find myself gazing up in wonder at the beauty of the tree. To be surprised by the natural world, to fall into reverie, to lose yourself in a forest and kind of get what I call mushroom eyes, where you can suddenly focus on tiny little details of noticing and lose your sense of time, feels so expansive compared to, say, the physical oppression of an art gallery or a street where you feel observed and seen, or you've driven into the wall at the Haywood and it's white. And you feel like you're doing it wrong for some reason. And of course, as a mobility aid user, I'm still tethered to logistics, the power of my mobility aid, my own internal battery of a sick body, the pain I'm in. But I still want these reveries, and it's easier to get lost outside of urban environments, I find. So an example of how all of these thoughts about intrusions and expansions has played out for me is a project called Abby Palmer Invents the Weather. During the pandemic, for me, like many people, I'm immunocompromised. I take chemotherapy drugs to control my arthritis. And touch became very scary, but I also found myself desperate for something to cling to. At the end of the first UK lockdown, my partner and I drove to Essex and bought 2 knockoff Siberian cats. On the left, we have a little picture of, I'm not good at left and right, so we've got, I think the left on this PowerPoint is Xiao. She's a tabby cat, and in this picture, she's hanging off a door and looking startled and confused as to how she got there, like an owl somewhat. And then on the right, we have Lola, who is a black and white tuxedo cat. These are meant to be sisters. Again, a knockoff situation. Everyone was buying cats off the internet at this time. I wouldn't recommend it. Adopt, don't shop. But they came home and they were soft and beautiful, and I got to touch them and I got to feel like the intimacy and holding that I really needed in that period. But also their animalness and their wildness really surprised me. As someone who was missing intrusions, the way they moved through space was absolutely bewildering. It felt like an expansion of my small boxed-in accessible flat, like I kind of had these creatures in a jungle. But I live on the 3rd floor in central London, and cats are unable to leave safely. Because this is an international audience, in the UK, the idea of indoor cats is still quite new, and it's far more controversial than in other countries. But when I realized how desperate they were to engage with smells and sounds of the outside world, to lose themselves in the jungle of my laundry or the twigs I brought home for them to sniff, I felt like I wanted to offer them the expansion and the surprise and the unexpected reverie that they were bringing for me. It was kind of like boxes within boxes within boxes situation. I suddenly realized I was doing to them what was happening to me, and we were all trapped in this one flat. 9% of buildings in the UK of homes are wheelchair accessible. So I can't leave the one I'm in. There are so few others. But it meant that my cats too are trapped. So I spent a year working on a project called Abby Palmer Invents the Weather, where I brought the outside world into them and translated it into something cat appropriate. Here, an oyster mushroom really grew at my cat show. We really enjoyed sniffing it. And there's an image also of Lola having a really good sniff of a leaf. This was at a time during the end of the lockdown period where everyone was told in the UK that it was Freedom Day and you could leave, but I was still unable to safely leave the house. And while other people were mixing and going to work again, like the mass disabling event and unnecessary deaths had never happened or had simply gone away, I was indoors. So this project began to be a way to navigate the intrusion of my own isolation, a way of finding and creating reverie for me and my cats, and a way of making sense of my own anxiety and fears over the climate crisis and my role within it. For me, cats are a queer family. I thought a lot about Derek Jarman and how he how he went away to navigate his own disability, but for me, bringing creatures into it, I don't know why I brought that up, but it just felt relevant to bring them into a home and create this kind of crip and queer family felt really important to me. And I'm going to show you a small extract from Abby Palmer Invents the Weather now. Again, it's on the Zoom chat, it's on YouTube, and it's upstairs in the building centre. But here is a small extract from the first episode. It's Abby Palmer Invents the Weather, Rain. Being as I am no god or scientist, I am forced to work backwards. On the night of the Hunter moon, it rains with the most abandon I have ever seen. It's electric. I want you to feel this energy, but you hate to get your paws wet. I begin to gather drop after drop from the rusty crack in the balcony ceiling. The water is scentless and slightly yellow.
I take a trip to the forest and find that everything has already been transformed by the rainfall. When I sink my fingers into the damp and mushy earth, life has sprung from it. Mushroom, slime mould, lichen, moss. I bottle and jar my findings, drowning them in the moon-infused water. We wait. The jars develop a glassy sheen, thick and gloopy. Some begin to smell pungent. I pour them away without showing you. Oh, friends, perhaps it is cruel of me to blinker you, but I need you to understand the rain as a freshness. We already know too much about stagnation. Miraculously, the ones that are left begin to smell like rain. I don't have the technical prowess to perform an entire water cycle, sucking up vapour and forming misty clusters in the sky. But I try my best. I strain each jar through sheets of cheesecloth. It drips, just a little sprinkle. It needs to be bigger. I gather my swampy bundles and stitch them together. It's late at night and you're watching, wondering why I won't leave your bedroom. But something's happening. I need you to see it. It's fermenting. It's becoming alive. It gets heavier and heavier. I don't know how vapour does this, hanging from the sky as if it were nothing. It takes all my strength and 6 strings to lift this thing. But you feel it, don't you? I've made it happen. How could you possibly look away? It is raining. It is autumn. Oh God, it smells so much of the earth.
Yeah, very beautiful fade out there.
Thank you so much, Abby. We have time for some questions now. If anyone, if anyone has some for Abby. Oh, yes.
You talked about the mystics and Teresa of Avila.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is not a fully formed question, but does that relate to your experience of weakness or perhaps of pain in disability?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly Saint Teresa of Avila. When I was 17, I learned about her for the first time. I was starting to have experience of out of body experience, so like climbing out of my body through. It turned out to be through a level of sleep deprivation from pain that was making me lift, and I still lift if I'm in too much pain. And I learned that Saint Teresa of Avila lifted too, and she lifted so much that nuns had to sit on her in a row to stop her from rising, according to her own autobiography. And I really related to that. So my first book, Sanatorium, is kind of a sexy appeal to her. I write to her personally in that book a little bit. Yeah.
Excellent book. Was anyone else like to ask Abby Palmer a question? No? If not, I have a few. Oh, okay, yes. Amelia.
Hi, Abby. Thank you for that. I also just, while I have you, I just want to say that we got to go to Slime Mother when it was in Sheffield, and as a blind person going to what was mostly a visual art exhibition, it was really nice to feel held. I often feel a lot of interruption in those spaces, and that the way all of that was set up just worked really well. And the wall that you mentioned where you could stick your hands in mud and put on was really nice for me for a lot of reasons. Obviously, because I could actually do that and did. I didn't write profanities, but I did write hello. But also, the day that I went, there were a lot of young people and their parents, and their interaction with it also gave me a really clear insight into what was on the wall. There was a young kid that was like describing the different types of. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it was a young kid who was just like, look at how big that handprint is, and mine's really small. It was just so nice. And also the slugs having sex over top of your head was also very cool, obviously. Anyway, I guess I have as someone who also, I really appreciate the words of interruption and reverie. This microphone is doing a lot of interrupting. Anyway, I appreciate those words a lot. And I just wonder if you could talk about bringing reverie into mainstream spaces like galleries that are kind of designed to interrupt disabled bodies and disabled lived experience. And just, I know that you talked about it with your mobility. Oh, for fuck's sake. I'll try this. Thank you. A different mic. I know you talked about it with your mobility device and things that have happened, but in terms of when you're curating a space that has your art, if you could talk about how you navigate the interruption and creating reverie, that would be lovely.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks so much for visiting, and I'm really glad that was a nice experience for you. That's like the happiest thing to hear, so thank you. And yeah, for me, I didn't realize until quite recently that able-bodied people in art galleries, people who consider themselves able-bodied, their legs hurt constantly. I didn't realize, why would you create a space where everyone's in pain? It's so weird to me. What are we doing? It's so strange. And the reviews for Slime Mother, the first exhibition of Slime Mother in Chapter in Cardiff, all the reviews only talked about my diagnosis and the seating, which isn't the art. Like, they were just like, oh my God, incredible. Look at the way they built these chairs. And I was like, there's 8-foot-long slugs above those chairs. and people kind of really made it a show about disability. And of course it is, because it's off my body, but it's also a show very much about slugs. So they're really present in every single artwork. But yeah, when I'm making to answer your question a bit more specifically rather than just ranting, I feel like when we're in spaces like that, like to negotiate, the first thing you have to do is say, when I use Intrusion as manifesto, I mean it all the way through. I mean that your workers need to be allowed to rest too. I've had arguments in one of the installs, because the slugs are very heavy, we had to reinforce the ceiling, and people were climbing rigs to hang them, and we had to really think about, like, are you allowed to rest? Is your body being held too? And so for me, throughout the experience, it's an ongoing, sometimes conversation, sometimes argument about what does a body need in order to be held, and and not just my body and not just your body, curator, but all of the bodies that are coming into this space. And then it becomes, I think I saw a bit of Hannah and sorry, I'm really bad with names. You know, Yola? Yola. I saw a bit of the talk yesterday about how institutions are navigated, and so often access is something that they'll do for my show because they're like, well, that's for disableds, and then for the next show go back to never thinking about it again. And we've had really big fights about that, like, what does that mean in terms of paying for BSL? And I don't have a perfect answer, I guess, is my honest answer. It's a constant negotiation and an argument. But I think because my practice is centered around access as a part of the practice and built into the design of the practice, it becomes an easier thing to argue. If I need a day off, I can be like, well, that's the part of the performance of this. If the show isn't ready yet, that's what you get. You get a wonkily hung picture because I was too tired to hang it straight. But also for my audience, I want that experience too. I don't think access is always equivalent. You don't need exactly the same experience or an exact interpretation of each experience, but you need to feel held in that room. Like, that's to me what access is. I can't remember if I answered your question. I just went off on a tangent. Yeah.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Helen.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about reverie, about whether there's a need to redefine reverie, or whether that's sort of what you're doing, because I've just been on a sort of well-being coaching course where reverie became a sort of way to generate ideas, to generate things that could be then really productive. And I was just thinking about whether there's an unproductive notion of reverie that perhaps, I think this is what you're talking about, but whether we need to think of a different term, like, but embodied reverie just feels like a sort of coaching course kind of term to be like channeled into kind of more productive bodies. So I don't know if there's a different way of thinking about reverie. I was thinking about when you were talking about walking and about how that is a way to generate ideas, poetry. And on this course, I learned that Charles Darwin had a path made for him so that he could walk and have like ideas that somehow, very dodgy ideas that would transform the world. So I just think maybe, I don't know if you thought about thinking of a different term or something that sort of questions that. And I know Intrusion does, but I don't know, is there a different term we can bring?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, for me, what's interesting about you saying that is, like, for me, reverie, if I'm like in a forest and I'm having reverie, the thing that's the reverie is I'm not thinking about productivity at all. I guess the walking and the idea, like in the University of Cambridge, where I studied and then couldn't anymore, they build paths everywhere. Like, it's for walking and thinking. It's a city built for walking and thinking, and you're not allowed. I was constantly being told off for having the wrong kind of mobility aid in the wrong space, and then loads of it's inaccessible anyway. But the idea of being lost in thought as a way of productivity is definitely comes from that sort of place. For me, reverie is also another thing where it's just being allowed to be lost, and something I think is like the idea of losing yourself, not to find something, but just to not feel your context feels important to me. I think you and I have had conversations about all the terms before, intrusions and frictions. I think you raised for me, which has been a really nice way of thinking about what happens, what's a positive friction, what's a negative friction. But reverie, for me, I don't know. I feel attached to it. Actually, I feel defensive of reverie because I want to allow to be able to be lost without productivity, and some reverie has to be non-productive, and it's such a capitalist notion even for me to be saying, here you are, use all the shit that's happening to you in order to get more work done. But like but also equally I feel defensive that disabled artists and disabled practitioners and disabled people in general get to be born witness to, and I think you don't have to be producing something that's for the world in order to identify and acknowledge your intrusions and find ways to get to not be so burdened by them, I guess is what I'm arguing a little bit for, complicatedly. But yeah, I thank you. That's a really great question that I'm going to be thinking about.
Thank you all so much. We have a lunch break now until 1:45 p.m. Thank you so much once again to Abby Palmer. Yay! Please do check out the film in its entirety and have a good time chatting to one another.